Hey, everybody, it's Kelly Nielsen here, the Grief Guru. And on this channel, we discuss all things related to grief. What does it look like? What does it feel like? But most importantly, we share tips, tools, and resources on how to move through grief and get back to living a life that you love. On today's episode, we're going to be diving into the process that is planning a funeral. I know it is such an ordeal and such a whirlwind, especially when you're incapacitated with grief. And so I'm so thrilled to have Carrie Alexander with me on the video today, all the way from Australia. And she is going to share with us some tips and thoughts that you should be considering as you go about planning a funeral. So Carrie, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Kelly, and thank you so much for having me a part of your Grief Guru. I'm excited to be here with you.
Yeah, well, I've been looking forward to this conversation. I know we have chatted back and forth, and I know your kind of methodology and your view about the funeral process is so different than what I encountered when I had to go about this the 2 times in my life. So I'm just thrilled that you're in the world and doing the work that you do. But why don't you share for folks the story of how you even got in the funeral business to begin with? Because I always say I didn't grow up wanting to be the grief guru. I doubt it was like a childhood ambition for you. So I would love for you to share kind of how you ended up in this industry in the first place.
Okay, so this all came about when my mum passed back in 2010, and she was in a regional area I live in Sydney in New South Wales, and she was in a slightly regional area, and we had no choice given as to the funeral home to use. We were sent by the hospital to the local funeral home, and that was a really difficult process. I've got 7 siblings. We're all sitting around the room with mum's recent partner. They'd only married 2 years previously. And the funeral home were just upselling at every chance they could, like pushing to the back of the casket brochure with the most expensive casket at $20,000 or something, and going, Ruth was such a beautiful woman. She really deserved this casket. We're all kicking John and saying, no, you don't need to make a decision now. We'll come back to this. And I think that's probably one key thing that I would say to families is don't just go with who's ever been suggested. Like, really, don't do it yourself, because you're in grief. You're in shock a lot of the time, and it's a really monumental space that you're in. So ask a family member to do a bit of research for you, to look around and find a funeral home who will resonate with how you feel, resonate with the life that your loved one lived, resonate with your life and how you want to celebrate the life of your loved one. Because some of the standard funeral homes that have been around for so many years, unregulated, I feel, and this is not all funeral homes, and I really want to say that I'm not here to bag out funeral homes. It's just, we need to step up. We need to care for families. We need to be open and transparent and make the families the center of our world for that time we're working with them, and really hold them in that space.
I love that. I want to touch on 2 things you said, because the first, we were chatting before we started recording that I honestly don't even remember how we decided which funeral home we were going to use when my son passed away. I know I didn't make that decision. I showed up somewhere. And so that is the first great tip, that if you're the person that's immediately grieving, your cognitive skills and reasoning probably are incapacitated in some kind of level. And so if you can have a friend or family member help you in this process, that's going to be huge. And so for the friends and family members that are watching, this is a great way that you can come alongside and really help your grieving friend or family member do the legwork, do the research, try to talk with them and get them to articulate as best they can what they want in terms of the celebration of life and the funeral experience, and then go do the interviewing process for them. And maybe that happened. It could have honestly happened, and I just don't even know about it. But I guess so. That is Yeah, that's perfect. I'm going to ask now. I'm going to go back and ask. Maybe they did that and it just loved me in that way and I had no idea. But, you know, to have somebody do that for you or to step up and just take on that responsibility if you're capable and it's appropriate is such an excellent tool. I know in the grief survival guide that we passed out, that's the first tip, is to get a buddy, to get somebody who can make phone calls and answer and kind of do the administrative things that your brain just, and emotionally you're not in a space to tend to details when you're in this space. The second thing I want to touch on that you said that was shocking to me is that it's not regulated. I did not know that it's not regulated, and that's so mind-boggling to me because there's regulations for people to give haircuts and there's regulations for all of these things. And I guess, you know, again, when you're grieving and you're in that state, you just assume, it's just like when you go to a hospital, you assume that people are operating from some kind of code or whatever. So to hear, I'm thankful I didn't have that experience that people were trying to gouge us on pricing or whatever. I do know though, and I can relate that we went into a room with some urns and things like that, some pieces of jewelry. And, you know, when looking online, it was like, I mean, an absurd amount difference between what you can, you know, buy on your own versus what's in the funeral home, because whether they're intending to do it or not, you're in this very sentimental, emotional place. And it felt like we were supposed to buy the stuff, you know, like it felt like we're here and this is part of the process. And so I'm so glad that we're talking about this. So if anybody's watching, if you're watching this video and you are in the process of planning a funeral and preparing, don't feel obligated to buy the stuff. It does not make you a bad, you know, person or whatever. You can take time and maybe you do buy some stuff from there, you know, and you find a great product that you connect with and want to get, but don't feel obligated. Yeah, what were you going to say?
And I was going to say on that as well, is don't make a decision there and then. Well, actually, I'll step back a little bit. And I think a person who is grieving, a family that is grieving, don't want to go and sit in a funeral home. They don't want to go and sit in a little dark room where people talk in hushed tones. Get that funeral home to come to your home, to sit around your dining room table, pour a cup of tea and have a chat there. You need to be cared for in this space. Make them come to you. You shouldn't have to get in your car and drive anywhere. You're not in a fit state to do that. You're much more comfortable in the family home, and regardless of what state it's in, don't even think about that. Get them to come and sit with you. And, you know, with those decisions about caskets and jewelry and urns, they all come after. It's mainly the casket for that day. For the funeral that you need to consider, ask to have a brochure, either a soft copy or a hard copy, sent to you so that you can sit around with your family with the prices attached so that you can make an informed decision outside of that space, because they don't need an answer then and there. That's taken care of. It's in the best possible care. It doesn't need to be moved into that casket straight away. You've got a day or two to make those decisions. So that'd be a really big point. Get a catalogue with prices attached so that you can make a decision and let them know at a later stage on your choice.
What about the idea about even having a casket or not having a casket? Like we didn't have a casket. My son was cremated and we just had his picture and flowers. Do you find that more and more people are doing that, or do most people still get a casket?
It depends on the celebration that they have. If you're doing a direct cremation, that's what we call it here, a direct cremation, whereas the body goes straight to the cremation parlor. The body is cremated and the family get the ashes back. So in that case, then people are either going for no casket, they're going for the bio-friendly caskets, they're going for, something very simple or not, no casket at all. Yeah. And that's another big choice that people don't know. They have that choice.
Right.
Do the direct cremation and then do a memorial service a little bit later with the urn present. It's that cuts the cost enormously.
Yeah. So
Enormously.
that's why I love like that we're having this conversation, and so that people can learn about these options and begin to learn. I was, as we were talking about before the video, that's a big part of grieving and going through grief is learning about what you want and what you don't want, what feels good and right to you and what doesn't, and then advocating for yourself, whether it's having people help you and asking them to help, or being clear about what you want and what you don't want. And so I just want to speak a word about the traditions piece of it, right? Because that's a lot of things. When I coach clients, we take a look at their beliefs and traditions around grief, and we help them to realize or decide for themselves which traditions and beliefs do they really choose and believe, which ones are serving them and which ones might not be serving them. And it starts right here, just because in your family and when you've gone to funerals in the past, there was a casket, and that's how. So a lot of people will just do that on autopilot because that's what they've seen. But to just take a minute and say, wait a minute, this is, think about the loved one and the celebration they want to have, and what does that entail, and whatever, works for them, whether it's traditional or not. So let me just, if you're watching this video, I give you permission and I empower you to decide for yourself about what you and your family, what works, in your budget and in your lives, and what is honoring and a great way to celebrate the life. Because the last thing anybody needs is financial burden on top of dealing with grief and loss.
Yeah. And I think that's a big point as well, the financial burden. People go in and they're sold these huge packages, and inside they're going, shit, I can't afford that.
Right.
And on the outside, they feel they have to say they can,
Right.
Scrambling. It's fine to say, we have got this budget. What
Right.
can you do for me? What can you offer for me within this budget?
Yeah.
My guide with families, I say you've got the direct cremation where you pay this amount, or if you want to have a funeral at the local chapel, it's going to be, quite a few $1,000s more because you've got the coffin present, you've got people in a chapel, but there's other choices. Like here we have local surf clubs that will have the coffin present, and how beautiful in a surf club looking at the ocean behind you.
Yeah.
And having that celebration there. You can also have the celebration if you've got a big enough back garden that you can bring the casket into the back garden. You can have all the family decorating and taking flowers from the garden, or that they've foraged these ferns and flowers, and decorate that casket yourself and make all of that a part of that grieving, and under the big oak tree in the back garden, and having the family there with the music playing. It's, See,
that never even occurred to me. That never even occurred to me. And I'm like, in this space that I work, I always equated it to like a church. You have to have it in a church, and for my mom, we did it a little bit different. We didn't have a traditional service. We didn't have a funeral. She was cremated, but we just all went out to lunch. We went to one of her favorite restaurants and rented out the banquet room, and we just all had a meal together, and had some pictures on the TV, a little, so it was very untraditional. But I love that idea of being, outside somewhere, or at a family home or something, and have everybody be there. And because the funeral is a very cathartic, healing experience. It's the last time that everybody that's connected to that person is in that, is in the same place. And so it is really special. It is, a really important part of the mourning and grieving process. But yeah, I love this conversation, because we're going to see services in the backyard because people saw this video.
Yeah. And your loved one is going to much prefer to be, in the backyard with all their loved ones around
Right.
them. A little chapel that means nothing to the family. But this is tradition, and this is all we know. And that's why I think these conversations are important, to allow people to be authentic, to allow people to make choices and
Right.
go, this is what's right for my loved one.
Yeah.
You know, like your son, you know, in his case, having an open mic so all of his friends can talk and share their grief and their mourning and, you know, what they're feeling and their love for
Yeah.
Quentin, you know? So, yeah, opening up conversations is very important, I think.
Even the idea of, here's a concept that I didn't realize until Quentin died, but making it open to the public or having it be private, you know? And so if you're not aware of that, that is a choice that you have. If you want it to just be private and by invite only the close family members, you absolutely can do that. Now, in my case, for Quentin's, we made it open to the public because of the nature of his passing, and we wanted and we got a couple hundred kids that came. You know, he was a freshman in college, and so a lot of kids, and this was their first experience with loss, and because it was a drug overdose, and I know that several of those kids who were in the room, you know, had engaged in that type of activity with him, you know, that was, for me, that was a really important part. I spoke at the funeral, I gave a eulogy, and I gave a warning to all those kids, and we actually had people available after the service that if they had been struggling with drugs or wanted some help, they could come and talk to people. And we had probably 4 or 5 kids come down and talk and ask for help. Actually, it's a crazy story, but the young man who sold Quentin the drugs that he died from showed up at the funeral, if you can imagine that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I wish it was huge, and he ended up not staying. I wish I could say that I held it together. I did not. We knew what he looked like, and so as all these kids started flooding in, I asked, his dad had met him. His dad was there the night that he bought the drugs, the night before he passed away. So his dad had met this kid, knew what he looked like. So when all these kids started flooding in, I said, there's a lot of kids here. I wonder if the kid that sold it to him is here. And he's like, oh, he's right over there. And I was like, what? And so I looked this kid dead in the eye, and then I turned around and walked away because I did not want to say or do anything that I would regret. Quentin's girlfriend went up to him and forgave him on behalf of the family. She went up to him and said, you know, we forgive you and you can't carry this. And he just started sobbing and left the church. Like, he didn't stay for the service. And I have no idea where that kid is today or how this has shaped his life or anything like that. But so these are all things to consider, and there's no right or wrong, right? So if you want it to be private and intimate, that's fabulous. If you want to take this opportunity to speak, you know, on behalf of the person you lost, it's a moment in time, right? Like it's like we said, it's when everybody's all in one place. And so for me, as Quentin's mom, I felt I wanted to speak to his friends and like on his behalf, right? And that's what in the video about a eulogy, it's like, that's part of when you give a eulogy is you're remembering the person and sharing about the person. But the other thing is it's an opportunity to tell everybody in the room what you think the person you lost would want them to hear, right? To speak for them a little bit. And it was really important for me to be able to do that. But again, there's no right or wrong. We just want to encourage like thoughtful, reflective contemplation, because this is a very monumental thing. You know, think about people spend years planning weddings and thousands of dollars and all sorts of stuff, and most times in a funeral you have to just whip it together, you know, within a couple of weeks or whatever. So take a deep breath, step back, think through some things.
And that's what I was going to say. Another point is to, when that person passes, don't pick up that phone straight away. Don't call the funeral home straight away. You have got time. Pour a cup of tea, take a breath. This is a sacred place in that passing.
Yeah.
To be with your loved one, to put their music on, to light a few candles, to hold their hand and be in that space. Because once that phone call is made, then
Mm.
things start moving pretty quickly after that, and then you go into the next phase of planning that memorial service, planning that the cremation, whatever it is you're planning. You get into planning mode. You can't avoid that. So in those moments, you've got 12 hours. Just open windows and keep that body cool, but you can sit with your loved one and just have those really special moments before making that call. And I think not many people know that. They just go, oh my God, they've died, I need to make a call. No, just step back, take a breath, and just sit with your loved one. Because for you moving forward, that is very cathartic to have that moment in time.
Yeah, that's,
Really,
I wouldn't have thought to know that. I didn't have that opportunity in either case, right? It was an after the fact kind of thing. And so that's another thing, for people to have permission either way, whether you choose to see the body or like, so if you're in my case, you just find out that you've lost your loved one, and if there's an opportunity to go and see them, that's incredibly personal. And I didn't in either case. I chose not to. And I'm totally happy with my choice and at peace with my choice, so I can't tell you, but I just want to say you're not right or wrong, or it doesn't mean that you loved them more or less if you choose, and I'm here to say too that if you choose to not go see them, it doesn't mean you won't have closure. It doesn't mean that you can't heal and move forward. It's not going to be some like untied knot in your life. I absolutely have peace and closure. So just another thing to think about. Yeah.
Yeah. And I agree entirely. And that's, I guess, through having these conversations, is that you can see there are choices. And that's
right.
what comes down to. Families have choices. You can choose to see your loved one or not see your loved one. You can choose. There was another point that I made. If your loved one has died at home, normally the funeral company will come in and your loved one is put into a body bag and zipped up and they're wheeled out of the house. That is very confronting, like very confronting. So what has been suggested is to leave that body bag open, put their favorite blanket with them, depending a treasured item or something that you can get back from the funeral home at a later date, but just while they're leaving, just have that gentleness about that passing. And then, once they're in the car, it can be zipped up or whatever, but just, that closed body bag is really tough, really, really tough.
Yeah.
So in every situation, there are choices.
Yeah.
And often those funeral companies will just zip it up without a second thought, whereas I can go, hey, let's leave it open, here's, put this blanket in, or, God forbid it's a child, but a favorite teddy bear or something like that. And just there, every step of the way, there are more choices. There are things you can think about rather than just being led by the funeral home down the traditional track. This is what happens. And it's difficult in those times to think clearly and make those choices. But
oh my goodness, it's difficult in those times to like put shoes on to get basic motor functions to work. So like it's very difficult. I love just your point of view on it and your approach. And I want you to share a little bit, because I know that about your timeline when you work with a family, like talk about, how long you work with the family and your view of what it should look like for a funeral home to come alongside somebody during that time.
Yeah. So my initial steps from that first phone call is normally getting legal paperwork signed. And I find that really hard, saying, guys, I know this is really tough, but we've got to get this legal paperwork signed to be able to release the body into our care. So that's the initial step that has to happen fairly quickly. And once that has happened, once we have collected the loved one who is in our care, we take really great care of the loved one who has passed, like really tender care throughout. So there's no rush to plan that celebration within 5 days, within 3 days, and some funeral companies will push for that to get it done, work towards this date. It's a lot of work. It is a lot of work to bring together. If you're having a slideshow, finding someone who can bring that together and embed that music with it, do the order of service, choose the music, let everybody know we're in COVID, so you've got to get names and addresses of everyone. And, families find this, and I just say, we don't need to rush this. Like, how about we look at, 2 weeks out? There is storage costs during that time, so that adds to the cost. And I make that really clear with my family that, but they're not huge costs either to store the loved one for a longer period of time. So for me, if someone died on a Monday, we collected on that Monday, I would be looking at, possibly the following week on the Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. A lot of families would want for that Friday, but I think that is just too rushed. To be able to sit in your grief, bring this together, and then be composed enough on the day to face people is a big ask in a matter of 4 days. So, 9 days is a much better option. So during that time, I sit with my families quite a lot. I engage a celebrant, and I work with a lot of different celebrants and priests as well, and spiritual people, so that I can choose. When I sit with my families, I get a very good idea as to who I think would be a perfect fit for them to run that service for them. So then I introduce that person, and that is that planning to ensure that, the family's point of view is put across as to what they want, and then it's up to that celebrant to deliver a really meaningful service around that loved one, and bring in and ask those questions like, do you have an open mic? Are there any people here that are not present that we want to recognize in this time? How do you want to see the passing of your loved one? Have they, are they with the spirits now? Have they gone to heaven? Or is it, a family who has no religious beliefs or no spiritual beliefs? So none of that is covered. So I also put a lot of emphasis on dressing the loved one. Like, how do you want the loved one dressed? What clothes do you want chosen? What other items would you like put? This is not for a direct cremation, although that can still happen for a direct cremation, but items to go in the casket with the loved one, all those elements to ensure that they are really cared for in that space. And then it's bringing together the whole service and offering choices about, where do you want this? Because in Australia, we have like the local cremation areas where they have, like, there's a graveyard on site, there's the cremation services on site, they have the chapel. So that is like the easy option that most funeral companies go down that route. And I use that a lot during COVID because it was the only way we could do it. None of the other options were available. So, but then, as I said, you've got the surf clubs, you can have your back garden, you can have, there's so many different options you can have. So talk to your funeral home and ask them, what choices do I have? What other choices are there? And that funeral home would be sitting with you and saying, what do you see as the best celebration for your loved one? Like, what would you prefer? What do you see as the best? And then offer different things, like a surf club, a football pitch. If my boys play soccer, so maybe you have something on the local soccer ground where they always play soccer, and that's where all their mates were. And you contact the local council and say, can we have the coffin present? And most people say yes.
But as we know, I'm having an idea. I think maybe a business is being born live on this YouTube channel because as we know, unfortunately, not all funeral homes operate this way. So would you be interested in facilitating, just navigating through this process for people, but not actually, if it was someone in the US and they just don't know where to go and they don't know what to do, like, people hire wedding planners all the time that use different vendors and this and that. Like, have you thought of, or, would you consider just walking people through that and helping, consult them and lead them through this process?
Absolutely.
I think we should make that happen because I wish I would have had you, and, if I have loss in my future, you'll be the person that I'll be calling to get advice and suggestions. I just love I think it's actually like a grace or a gifting or anointing. Like, you just are so in tune with what it's like for the people going through it. You're so in sync with how heavy and hard it is. And most people, view it very transactionally and as a business. Yeah. And so we need more people like you, and we need people that are going through loss to have your services, so I think we need to figure that out.
Thank you. I think we do. And I love that you've recognized that in me, because I think I take on the whole family, and I'm there. And we spoke about this earlier, that once that day has happened where you have the memorial service, after that the family's left,
right,
and you go, what do we do now? So
right,
I want to have resources on my website, like, are you grieving? Are you finding your grief difficult? Contact Kelly. She's the amazing grief guru. She'll be able to help you. There's other services here in Sydney that I've reached out to people to offer different services, to have that on my website, to say, we're here. It's the whole picture. It's not a business transaction on the day
right.
to get that person buried. We are caring for the family. We're holding the family in that space and saying, hey, what can we do? How can we help?
Yeah.
This is tough. This is a tough area. And, as you realize, you just don't know what to do in this space.
Right.
And that's what all families say to me.
Right.
I've never done this before. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, especially the first loss, the first time you really encounter loss. And even, it was my mom the first time, and my dad was there, and so he kind of took care of a lot of these things, so I didn't know, and so then when it was my son and I was really the one that had to make a lot of these decisions, it's a different ball game, even depending on who it is that you lose. Obviously losing a parent versus losing a spouse versus losing a child, these are all different kind of dynamics. But we're going to have to talk offline, because I'm envisioning start to finish, that we really hold people's hand through the funeral and that whole process. And then when they're ready to tackle the, moving forward and getting back to life piece, that's where I come in. Because I will be the first to admit, what you do is, it takes a special gifting and a person, because I wouldn't be able to do that, right? I'm the one that says, okay, now we're going to learn how to live again, and there's a life to be lived, and we're going to do it, so again, just so thankful for you, and so glad that you're doing the work that you're doing. Is there any, I know you had written down some tips. Was there any tips that you wanted to share that we didn't cover so far? I feel like we've shared a lot. I've learned.
I think we covered most of the tips that I'd noted down. And I guess for me, my main point is move away from tradition, move away from those indoctrinated ideas that, just open your mind to bring in a gentler, a kinder, a more loving space
a more flexible, affordable, you know, and there's nothing wrong with, and, you know, it's just like weddings, right? Like weddings, people spend a great amount of money and they're beautiful and they're elegant and they have their place. And if that's what's right for your family, awesome, you know, but weddings also can happen in the backyard and be just as meaningful and just as beautiful. And so that same kind of flexibility that we could go towards. Yes.
Yep, absolutely. We
Absolutely.
need to talk, Kelly, and we're going to.
I know, right?
It's going to be amazing.
So your company name is A Better Way Funerals, and we will put the link to her website in the description. And depending on when you're watching this video, there may be a link for some sort of joint product that we're about to go create together. But either way, whether it's with Carrie or not, let us, you know, we're here for you and cheering you on, and just want to encourage and empower you to pursue options, to be open-minded, to get help. Let people help you and love you during this season. It is a season, not a sentence. You will recover. I know it feels incredibly heavy and hard right now, and like you may never recover, but you will recover. Give yourself patience and grace, and know that we're here cheering you on every step of the way. So for more tips and tools, subscribe to this channel, and we will see you guys next time.
Bye, Kelly. Thank you.